everybody? It's time for another video. And today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the benefits of becoming a landowner. If you're thinking about buying land, I want to give you some reasons that I thought about that I jotted down on a blog post recently as to why you really could benefit from owning land. So let's get right into it. Certainly watch along if you have questions. Drop me a question in the comments at the end of the video, but let's just go through them. I wrote down a few, so I'm sure there are many more that I hadn't thought about, but these are some big ones. So topping off the list, I'd have to say one of the primary benefits to owning land is your ability to live on the land. You might be thinking, well, if I buy a house, I own the land below it, I'm living on the land. That's true, but if you buy land and decide to build a home, you have a lot more flexibility as to what you can get. So certainly you could build a custom home. And depending on the market, and if you know local builders, you might even be able to build a home brand new for less than what you'd be able to go out and buy something on the open market for. So if you're considering owning land and building a home on that land, may be a good idea after checking land prices and identifying the area you're interested in. It might be a good idea to call a few of the local builders. Just go to Google, type in builders in, home builders in, whatever the name of your city is, and just ask them, what's the price per square foot for building a home? And that price, they're going to give you a range. There's no definitive price. It's really going to depend on what it is that you want. Do you want an entry level home, or do you want a very elaborate home with nicer fixtures? The range will vary, but it'll give you a sense, depending on the size of the home that you want to build, how much you can expect to spend to build the home. You add that to the price of the land, and it might be more advantageous to buy land and build a home. And you don't have to build a traditional home. You could build a tiny home. Why not own a fair amount of land? And if you don't need a lot of space, build a smaller home. It'll be cheaper, and you've got all this beautiful land. You've got a home. If you don't want to build, if that's too much of a hassle, you can also put a manufactured home on your property. So a manufactured home is a home that was built somewhere else and then basically brought to your home, and either it's completely intact and just dropped on your land, or it's mostly intact and it's assembled on your land. But it's an easy solution for people who don't want to wait the 6 to 12 months to have their home built. Another option would be just living in an RV. I mean, people do it. There's a whole movement. It's called van life movement. Got to check with your county to see if that's allowed. A lot of times, if you're going to live in a structure that's not permanent, you need special permissions. You will have to, depending on the county, you will also have to put in a system to dispose of waste properly. Typically, that will require connecting either to the municipality's waste system, or putting in a septic system, a septic tank. But definitely check with the county. But you see already, you've got so many different options, a lot of flexibility depending on how you want to live. You don't have to move into an existing neighborhood and just deal with the inventory that's for sale. You can buy your land and really plan it out. If you want something small, go small. You want something huge, go big. You want 4 driveways, put them in. It's up to you. You've got way more flexibility. Another benefit, if you're living on the land, depending on where you are, you may be able to drill a well. So if you want access to your own independent water supply, if that's an option where you're buying your land and you want to pony up the money, you can build a well on the land. Or a lot of people want to buy land because they want to go off grid. They don't want to connect to the city electrical grid. They want to provide solar power or some sort of alternative power so that they're off grid. That's another benefit of living and owning land, living on your land that you bought. Another big benefit to owning land, a lot of people think about this if they're not going to live there, or even if they are going to live there, is land's ability to appreciate in value. That's all real estate. All real estate has the potential to appreciate in value. And over time, historically, it does, because there's a finite amount, especially with land. There's a finite amount of land, but the population growth in our country, in the United States, is growing. We're expecting over 100 million more people in the U.S. by the end of the century. So with all those people, they're going to need places to live. They're going to need places to work. They're going to need places for entertainment, for shopping malls, for storage facilities, all of those spaces or buildings built on top of land, which is just going to drive up the price of land. So if you invest in something today, depending on where you buy, it's not a guarantee that your land will go up in value. You really do need to take the time to think about what the price point is now, what the future looks like to the best of your ability for your area, and then make a competent buying decision. But so just here's a quick back of the napkin thing to think about when you're considering, will the land or the real estate that you buy appreciate in value? Is there population growth in the area where you're buying the land? So that's at the county level and state level and neighborhood level. Is there job growth? Are there big companies moving in on it, bringing in more jobs in and around the area? Those are two good signs that the value of real estate and the value of land will go up. Is the median household income in your area, in that zip code, in that county, is that increasing over time? Is the home value or home values going up? That could depend on the market cycle, but if home values have gone up, let's say over the last 30 years or even the last 10 years, that's a positive sign. It's not a guarantee, but it's a positive sign. Crime reduction is also another thing that you want to consider when you're buying land. All this information may not be readily available depending on where you're buying, but certainly you can go to like census.gov to figure out if the population is increasing in your county. And if it is, that's a good sign that values will go up over time, particularly if you're going to own or you plan on owning for a while. So all things you should consider. Just to throw some numbers out at you as well. If you're buying farmland, so farmland is land in which you plan to grow crops or raise livestock. If you're buying farmland, historically, let's say in recent history, over the last 15 years, according to the USDA, farmland has gone up by something like 75%. So that's a good indication. If you're buying farmland, you can expect values to continue to rise. Land is finite. More people need more food. You got to raise animals, grow, all of the crops that we need to feed ourselves and the cash crops that we use to provide the quality of life that we're used to. So investing in farmland would be a good idea. Or if you're just buying land in a city that's growing, we talked about it. So a city like Boston, let's take that. It's grown by 28% since 2008. Over that same 15-year period, it's grown. Prices of land have grown in that area by about 28%. If you go out to the Great Plains, Oklahoma City, land values over there in Oklahoma City have grown by close to 90%. I believe it's 89%. So it just depends on where you are as to the type of growth that you might see. Again, I can't stress this enough. There's not a guarantee that your land will rise in value, but historically, real estate has risen in value, particularly land. Another benefit is health. So outside of your mental health, which if you're desiring to own land, you're able to acquire it, if that's the lifestyle that you want, of course, you'll benefit with more or better mental health. But I'm talking about the health within your body, not just your mind, but your actual gut, your microbiome. A lot of people don't know this, but microorganisms in soil act as a natural inoculant and they improve our gut microbiome. So if you own land and you decide to have a garden or, raise chickens or whatever it is you want to do, if you're interacting with that soil, you're getting that soil on your nails and on your hands, those nutrients that are in the soil are basically get absorbed into the skin and into your bloodstream and have a positive benefit on your gut microbiome. So there's been research done on that. I'm by no means an expert, but check it out. Go to Google Scholar, scholar.google.com, type in soil microbiome, and you can read all the research on how interacting with soil is actually beneficial to our health. So just continuing on that, another benefit is just being a part of the great outdoors, so being closer to nature. That's probably an easier way to say it. This is something that a lot of people think about when they decide to move out of a city and onto a piece of land. It's just being out in the open air. It's spending more time with the sun on your face or being out at night looking up at the stars. I mean, it's just a really a peaceful feeling to just be closer and
interacting with nature on a regular basis, being around the animals, the insects. I'm not a huge outdoors fan. I'm not a nature guy, but when I get a chance to go out and to hike or get out on a piece of land, it is really enjoyable. It's a lot more peaceful. So, when you're living in the city, typically for most Americans, your day is going to be something like this. You wake up in your apartment or in your house, you get in a car, you drive to an office building, you work, go out of your office, you get in your car, you go to lunch somewhere in another building, you get back in your car, you go back to work, you leave work, you get in your car, you go to some sort of store, you get in the car, and then you go home. Like you're literally in an enclosed space 90 to 95% of your day, maybe more. You own land. Hopefully, you're spending time outside on your land, just being in nature, and that's just a great thing. Another opportunity for landowners, if this is the route that you choose to go, is you could actually buy land and uh, apply what's called a conservation easement on your land. Now, I don't have all of the details on this. I plan on learning more and sharing more once I learn more. But the premise is if you purchase a piece of land, you want to ensure that that land never gets developed or only gets developed in certain ways. When I say developed, that means that something is built or brought into that space that you don't want. You can write it down in an easement and have it recorded with the county and prevent any development on that land or particular type of development on that land. So what you'll see a lot of times is people who want to preserve the natural environment. They want to preserve the beauty, the natural beauty of a piece of land or a large piece of land. Talking hundreds of acres, thousands of acres, or even just small acreage. They apply for an easement and it says, hey, a shopping mall can never be built here. Subdivision for homes can never be built here. And on and on and on. You could prevent by law uh, what can and cannot be built on your land for generations to come. Once it's been recorded, it becomes written almost in stone, and anyone who comes behind you who owns that land, they're buying it with the knowledge that they can only do certain things with it. And that might be they can never build any structure. It has to remain in its natural state. Some people will even create easements that prevent building but allow the public to use it. So they allow people to come out and take tours and do hikes and whatnot. They make it open to public use by law, but they prevent any sort of building on the land. So if you're really passionate about nature, you want to preserve nature in a particular part of the country, you can have a conservation easement put on that land. Again, I'm not an expert, so you're going to want to talk with an attorney, talk with the county, and determine if your land is eligible for that. There might be size requirements. They may not allow easements or conservation easements on certain smaller pieces of land. I really don't know, but I do know that's an option that people, particularly people who are purchasing very large swaths of land, that they do take advantage of from time to time. So let's keep going. So switching off of nature and back into kind of the investment money side of things, you can make money with land. A lot of people think, what am I going to do if I just own a piece of land if I don't want to live on it? It's just sitting there. Maybe it goes up in value, but I got to pay taxes on this thing. It's not making me money. Well, you can buy land that makes you money. Certainly, like we talked about, you just buy it, sit on it for a while, turn around and sell it for a profit if it goes up in value. There's so many other things you can do to extract value out of land. So, of course, there's farming, growing crops, growing wheat, growing, lettuce, growing tomatoes, growing crops. I mean, that's big business. Everybody needs to eat. There are also cash crops, which are crops that are grown just for money, not for sustenance. You could grow those. You can raise animals. Again, another food source. You could, depending on where you are, I mean, people buy plots of land and they drill. They drill for oil. Unlikely that you're going to buy land with oil underneath, but you might get lucky. People buy land and they drill for minerals. A lot of the natural resources that we still use today, which is on our planet, have minerals underneath, and some of them we still need as we try to switch over to more renewable sources of energy. But then there are a dozen or more other ways. I'm just going to name a few off the top of my head, but let's say you've got a piece of land and it's got trees on it. If it's hardwood or a type of wood that can be used for things like paper or furniture, you can harvest timber. You can, depending on where you are, lease a portion of your land to a cell phone company. They can put a tower there to give people reception in the area. You could do the same thing if you're close to a highway for billboards. Lease a part of your land to a company that's going to erect a billboard and put advertisements there. You know, you can use it for business purposes. We've all heard of Airbnb, where people use their homes to rent out for vacation rentals. You can do the same thing with land, but with a more nature eco uh, feel to it. So you can build some sort of structure and use it for renting. There's a website called HipCamp, which allows people that are interested in vacationing in more remote places to find accommodations that are not your typical condo buildings or single family homes. So there are tons of ways to make money with land. I just named a few, but you know, don't think that owning a piece of land is just an asset on the balance sheet. You can certainly extract value and produce income on a regular basis, quarterly income, monthly income. You just got to get creative and look for ways. I'm going to do many more videos on this, but that's something to keep in mind. So let me go through a few other benefits. Using land as collateral. So let's say you own a piece of land, that land has value. If you need to go to a bank and get a loan for business reasons or for personal reasons, you can put up your land as collateral. Collateral is like the safety net that banks like to have, so that in the event you don't pay back the loan they give you, they have an asset that they can take from you and resell to retain some of their loss that they took on the loan. So you can use land as collateral to go out and get a loan from the bank. So that's very valuable for many, many centuries and decades. That was very important for people. And I'm sure for farmers and the like now, farmers will use their land as collateral to invest in their farm, to buy farm equipment, etc. Some of the obvious reasons, if you're buying land, depending on where you're buying it, if you're buying it kind of outside of the city, you're going to have less neighbors. It's going to be quieter. So that's certainly a benefit, just being in an environment that's a little bit more peaceful. You're not listening to all of the noise pollution from cars, from sirens, from, your neighbors playing music, whatever the case might be. That's a huge benefit, especially if you buy larger plots of land. You kind of have an isolated sound barrier because you're just farther away from people. Land can be a backup plan. That's another benefit. So let's say you're comfortable living where you live now, you have no plans of moving, or you can invest in land and have that for a rainy day or have it for your future. A lot of people, as they age, they want to retire, they want to downsize. You might downsize out of your large home with your kids once they've moved away and go build a smaller home on a piece of land, or bring a manufactured home to your piece of land, something small to live on in the future. Or we just went through a pandemic, and if you had land that was away from cities, large populations of people, that would have been a nice place to go take your family and socially distance while things are sorted out. So having land as a backup plan for life's uncertain events is certainly another benefit. All right, rounding out the list, got a couple more here. It's always good, in my opinion, to be an owner. It's kind of the motto of the channel. It's always better to own. When you're renting from someone, let's say you're renting an apartment, or you're renting a home, or even if you're leasing a piece of land, you're at the mercy of the landlord, the person who actually owns the land underneath your feet, the structure that you're living in. There's only so much you can do. When you own that piece of property, you decide, hey, you know what? I want to put a pond on my land. You go out and you build a pond. Assuming the county allows these things, you go out and you do it. If you want to, I talked about that you want to erect a fence. If it's permitted by zoning law, you can do it. You don't have to get permission from the person who owns the parcel of land, the person who owns the place where you're living, because you're the owner. So just fundamentally have more flexibility when you're the owner whether that's a piece of land, a business, etc. When you own, you just have more flexibility as to what you can do. So it's always better to own. And the final thing I'll say, again, this is just a list that I came up with off the top of my head. There are many more benefits to owning land. Well, one of the final reasons is you can get subsidies. This will apply to a smaller demographic of people who want to own land, but it's a benefit nonetheless. If you plan on owning land, the government at the federal level, the state level, and the local level, they do provide subsidies depending on how you use your land. They're basically incentives from the government for you to use your land in a particular way. So it might be for specific farming practices, for research and development, for conservation. There are different reasons that the government will pay you either through a direct payment, meaning they're going to send the money directly to your bank account if you're using your land in a particular way. And there are other different structures. I'm not an expert on that, but I do know that there are landowners out there who are getting subsidies from government agencies like the USDA for the way that they're using their land. So that's a quick list. I think I shut off about 11 benefits right there. As I mentioned, there are more, but hopefully this gives you more encouragement. If you're thinking about buying land, those are some good reasons to do so. If you have specific questions, you want to dig in deeper, shoot me an email. Again, that's chris@ownacres.co. I'll be happy to answer them to the best of my ability. And I plan on digging deeper on all of these topics in future videos so that you can really get a good sense of why it is advantageous to own land. If I don't know the information, I'll try and bring in an expert who can talk about the topic in more depth. So until the next video, thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for the next video. And remember, it's always better to own.